Ever since Legend of Korra began airing in 2012, there has been a lot of criticism and comparison thrown at the series, which is inevitable. When you follow up something this beloved, you're bound to draw that in. I've seen a lot of people say that Korra is worse, and because it's been almost 6 years since I've watched either series, I decided to go back and watch the first episodes of the two series and talked about where they worked and where they didn't. So the first episode of any series is meant to draw you in and make you attached to the characters in the story. You pretty much want to show that this is a story worth sitting through, and that the viewer will be rewarded with a satisfying conclusion. Now you saw the title already, so you know who I think did that better. I came up with 4 categories to show just how different these two are: characters, immersion, animation, and setting.
But when the world needed him most,
So in Avatar, we get introduced to our 3 main characters, Aang, Katara, and Sokka. Our first introduction to the characters is a conversation between Katara and Sokka, establishing something really relatable, a sibling argument. Everyone who has a sibling has argued with them before, so we get where these two are coming from. It helps that both of them are right in their own way. Katara has her head in the clouds, focused on stories of the past, yet she would have never saved Aang without that focus. Sokka is a lot more grounded, being the oldest male in their tribe and having to grow up fast because of all the other men in the tribe leaving for war. He views himself as the last line of defense against the Fire Nation and isn't interested in mysticism because he doesn't have time for that kind of thing. Once Aang gets out of the ice, we get a glimpse into how lovable and free-spirited he really is. He also has a good amount of wisdom to him, saying things like,
"If you want to be a bender, you have to let go of fear."
He still has flaws and lies to Katara about being the Avatar. He has imperfections that make him more endearing because a lot of people out there are scared of heavy burdens, and being 12 and told that you have to save the entire world is pretty heavy. Overall, Aang seems like a good person who has some growing to do, while Korra seems like a bad person completely fine with staying that way.
Well then, why are you treating me like a criminal? Avatar, Aang, and your mother were friends. They saved the world together. Well then, why are you treating me like a criminal? Avatar, Aang, and your mother were friends. Well then, why are you treating me like a criminal? Avatar, Aang, and your mother were friends. They saved the world together.
Korra doesn't have to be a good person to make people enjoy her, and taking things in a new direction from having a protagonist that is wise beyond their years, and reincarnating them as someone who's bratty and disrespectful is an interesting concept on paper. Where things start to go off the rail though, is when you have a protagonist who isn't a good person and isn't likable. To have successful series with protagonists who aren't good people, you should have the fact that they aren't good play into why you love them, or you should at least have the illusion of them wanting to change their behavior. Korra runs away from her home, endangering herself and the world, yet at the end of the episode she gets rewarded for doing so. The writers go out of their way to show Korra is out of her depth multiple times, having her meet a homeless person for the first time, stopping criminals by causing a ton of collateral damage, and having her seemingly escape the police only to get caught by a Zeppelin. The payoff to all of this is that Korra gets her wish to stay in the city, and the charges against her get dropped. Based on this episode alone, how can anyone watching this for the first time expect anything Korra does to have any consequence? Compare this to The Last Airbender, where Aang and Korra come across a wrecked Fire Nation ship. Katara tells Aang not to go in, but Aang insists, and because of that, he sets off a tripwire causing a flare to go off and drawing Zuko's attention. Here, we get a feeling that the actions taken in this series will have serious consequences, and any slip up could put a lot of people in danger. We also see Aang is blinded by his attraction to Katara, and doesn't consider the risk of going on the ship because he wants to impress her. When Korra destroys the shops of the streets she's fighting on, you're supposed to get the feel that Korra gets tunnel vision when she fights and doesn't care about the others around her, but I was just left confused as to why she wasn't taught how to minimize damage while in a well-populated area, especially given how she would more than likely have to deal with crime in Republic City at one point. These people have trained Korra for 14 years, yet never thought to add damage control to the curriculum. They're shown to be very strict with as many aspects of Korra's life as they can. These people are clearly obsessed with keeping Korra safe for the good of the world, and would have made sure to make her understand the importance of being aware of your surroundings, especially when they say things like this.
"You're getting ahead of yourself as usual, Korra. We haven't decided if you passed your firebending test yet."
Ever since you were a little girl, you've excelled at the physical side of bending, but completely ignored the spiritual side. The Avatar must master both.
Sokka takes some time to teach the boys of his tribe how to fight, and I like the realism of this scene. None of these boys are over the age of 8. They're simply not going to have the attention span for how serious he's trying to be. To keep their attention, you would have to do something completely different. Aang is closer to these kids in age, and because he wasn't thrust into adulthood the same way Sokka was, and knows how to get and to keep their attention. This was a great way to contrast these two and how their upbringings affect them. Now that we've talked about the avatars, let's talk about the side characters. I talked a little bit about Katara and Sokka, so I want to talk about Tenzin. Tenzin is my favorite character in this show, so needless to say I enjoyed him here. He's the last airbending master left and has a huge burden on his shoulders because of that. He cares for the people of Republic City and prioritizes them, yet still will take time to advance Korra's bending, choosing to let her live with him at the end of the episode. All in all, Tenzin is by far the best written character in this episode and was failed later on in the show.
Waterbenders deal with the flow of energy. A waterbender lets their defense become their offense.
The episode starts out with Katara's iconic monologue giving us an intro into the world. This is pure exposition and it can get a little clunky if it's drawn out, but here, the world is more fantasy oriented, so a storybook type of narration fits right in. When Katara finishes talking, you feel like you're stepping into an epic. Tenzin's monologue just doesn't measure up. The world has changed and we aren't stepping into that same type of story. His tone just doesn't match the situation. Tenzin is dealing with a Republic City that's rampant with crime, yet he talks like Aang created a utopia. I get that Mike and Brian wanted a reveal of Republic City not being as cool as it seems later on, but that type of reveal almost always falls flat because no place is going to be perfect. I think this would have been improved a bit if you added a line like, "Things don't always look bright in the city, but I do my best to honor his legacy and preserve the vision he had for it." In doing so, you can show that things aren't as amazing as Korra thinks they are, and you can still keep the same reveal, but just for Korra, showing that the writers think the viewers are smart enough that they can confide in them and won't see the city not being a paradise from a mile away. When a reveal is super obvious in this way, a person watching can just be taken completely out of the story.
I can't believe we forgot Toph can't write.
Yep, we're idiots.
Korra's animation is odd at certain points. There are times where the animators will just move a character as a PNG using keyframes instead of animating. To show you how easy it is, I'm going to show me doing the exact same thing in my own editing software, which is not nearly as advanced as the stuff they're using. It never looks good, and I don't know why they do this given how their budget was bigger than it was in The Last Airbender. They even do this later on in the series. There are some not so pretty moments when Aang and Katara go to the Fire Nation ship, but given how it's a pilot for a completely new IP, I think you can understand why they took some shortcuts here and there. Even when we do come to the poorly animated parts of the pilot, they don't look nearly as bad as they do in Korra. Now, I'm not an animator in any way, shape, or form, but I can still tell when something isn't up to par, and this is one of those things.
Are we here yet? Are we here yet? Oh, please!
Yes, Iggy. As I've been telling you for the last 15 minutes.
So these two episodes occur a long time apart in the timeline, so the possibilities open for Korra's story were pretty much endless. In The Last Airbender, we see a world rich with callbacks to ancient Asian cultures. Tons of set pieces that look like oil paintings, with vibrant colors and dynamic movement all coming together to create something that is wonderful to look at. In The Legend of Korra, we are transported into the Industrial Revolution. Look, I, like any other person who understands history, appreciate what that did for us as humans, but that type of setting doesn't really lend itself to escapism. I prefer steampunk type settings and more gritty stories. Technology advancing to this point makes sense to me, but I feel like a more stagnated world would really help this story feel like a continuation of Aang's story. People complain about the stagnation in Star Wars, but because of said stagnation, the visual style is so distinct that when you see a Star Wars property, you know it's a Star Wars property. Without the intro, if you were to just watch the two series on mute, you would not be able to really tell that they were connected, and would just see that they have similar looking element powers. These episodes both had their fun moments, but only one made me feel like I wanted to watch more. Republic City has an almost sickly pastel color palette, and it looks the same way certain fan fictions read. It's not an assault on the eyes, but it's not exactly pretty either. So there it is, all of my reasoning as to why I prefer Avatar over Korra. To be clear, I understand why people enjoy this show so much. The fights are insane, and the animation is almost always on point. Korra and Kavira's second fight is my personal favorite, and while that's partly due to my nostalgia from watching it for the first time, it still holds up to this day. There are tons of interesting concepts littered throughout the show, like the metal bending city, Rava and Vatu, and the Red Lotus. The failure comes in when it's time to execute those concepts, and then there's a dark avatar floating around. But things like that are what makes Aang's story so amazing. There are tons of interesting concepts there as well, and they all get executed well. Whether it's Zuko's Scar, the Dai Li, or Ba Sing Se as a whole, storylines get set up and interwoven, coming together to form a beautiful tapestry. The series isn't perfect, no series can be, but they accomplish what they set out to do. Doing things like waiting until the last season of the show to reveal the face of the main villain, letting suspense build and causing people to wonder what he could look like. This show feels like a true love letter to the Asian cultures I talked about earlier, even basing the bending movements on certain martial arts. Republic City just doesn't have the same level of respect for the Industrial Revolution era that they're trying to adapt for the show, and because of that, it just isn't as good as it could be. Love and respect for the source material and the fans made this franchise, but that same love and respect set a bar that The Legend of Korra just couldn't live up to.